Parks and Recreation, also informally known as Parks and Rec, is an American television sitcom starring Amy Poehler as Leslie Knope, a perky, mid-level bureaucrat in the Parks Department of Pawnee, a fictional town in Indiana. Created by Greg Daniels and Michael Shaw, the series aired on NBC from April 9, 2009 to February 24, 2015 for 125 episodes over 7 seasons. It uses the same filming style used in The Office, with the same implication of a documentary crew filming everyone. The ensemble and supporting cast features Rashida Jones, Aziz Ansari, Nick Offerman, Aubrey Plaza, Paul Schneider, Chris Pratt, Adam Scott, Rob Lowe, Jim O'Hare, Retta, and Billy Eichner. The writers researched local California politics for the show and consulted with urban planners and elected officials. Poehler's character of Leslie Knope underwent major changes after the first season in response to audience feedback that she seemed unintelligent and ditzy. The writing staff incorporated current events into their episodes, such as a government shutdown in Pawnee inspired by the real-life global financial crisis. Several guest stars, such as Will Arnett, Sam Elliott, Bill Murray, and Paul Rudd, have been featured in the show, and these characters often appear in multiple episodes. Parks and Recreation was part of NBC's Comedy Night Done Right programming during its Thursday night prime-time block. The series received mixed reviews during its first season, but, after a reapproach to its tone and format, the second and subsequent seasons were widely acclaimed. Throughout its run, Parks and Recreation received several awards and nominations, including 2 Primetime Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Comedy Series, 6 Emmy nominations and a Golden Globe win for Poehler's performance, and a nomination for the Golden Globe Award for Best Television Series, Musical or Comedy. In Time's 2012 year-end lists issue, Parks and Recreation was named the #1 television series of that year. In 2013, after receiving 4 consecutive nominations in the category, Parks and Recreation won the Television Critics Association Award for Outstanding Achievement in Comedy. Overview. Season 1 Parks and Recreation focuses on Leslie Knope, the deputy director of the Parks and Recreation Department in the fictional Indiana town of Pawnee. Local nurse Ann Perkins demands that a construction pit in the abandoned lot beside her house be filled in after her boyfriend, Andy Dwyer, fell in and broke his legs. Leslie promises to turn the pit into a park, despite resistance from the park's director Ron Swanson, an anti-government libertarian. City planner Mark Brendanavich, for whom Leslie harbors romantic feelings, pragmatically insists the project is unrealistic due to government red tape, but nevertheless secretly convinces Ron to approve the project. Leslie and her staff, including the sarcastic underachieving idealist Tom Haverford and the uninterested summer intern April Ludgate, try encouraging community interest in the pit project, but meet resistance. Later, Ann becomes furious to learn Andy has faked the severity of his injuries so Ann would pamper him. Meanwhile, a drunken and lonely Mark takes Leslie to the pit and kisses her, but she rejects his advances. Not wishing to move forward while Mark is drunk, an embarrassed Mark accidentally falls into the pit and injures himself. Season 2 Ann breaks up with Andy and begins dating Mark, with Leslie's approval. It is revealed that Tom's marriage to pediatric surgeon Wendy is actually a green card marriage, which, to his disappointment, eventually ends in divorce. The pit is eventually filled in, after which Ron is visited by his horrible ex-wife Tammy too, a librarian who unsuccessfully tries seducing him into turning the filled-in lot into a library branch. April becomes attracted to Andy, but he remains fixated on Ann. Just as Mark plans to propose to Ann, she reveals she no longer has feelings for him. They break up, and Mark leaves his City Hall career for a private sector job. Meanwhile, a crippling budget deficit leads state auditors Chris Traeger and Ben Wyatt to shut down the Pawnee government temporarily, much to Leslie's horror and Ron's delight. Meanwhile, Andy develops feelings for April, but she fears he is still hung up on Anne. Anne later kisses Andy due to conflicting emotions from her breakup with Mark, prompting April to reject Andy angrily. The season ends with Tom's shocked discovery that Ron is now dating his ex-wife, Wendy. Season 3, Leslie decides to bring back the defunct Pawnee Harvest Festival, the success or failure of which will determine the financial future of the department. While working on the festival, Leslie and Ben begin to develop feelings for each other. After weeks of planning, the festival becomes a tremendous success through Leslie's efforts. Anne and Chris briefly date, but they break up after he returns to his old job in Indianapolis. Later, Chris returns to become Pawnee's acting city manager, and Ben also takes a job in Pawnee. Jealous over Ron dating Wendy, Tom briefly dates Tammy too to get even, but the two eventually reconcile. Andy wins April back and they will start dating. Only a few weeks later, they marry in a surprise ceremony. Leslie and Ben began dating, but keep it secret due to Chris's policy against workplace romances. Leslie is approached about possibly running for elected office, a lifelong dream of hers. But when asked about potential scandals in her life, she neglects to mention her relationship with Ben. Tom quits his City Hall job to form an entertainment company with his friend, John Ralphio. The season ends with a horrified Ron learning that his first ex-wife, Tammy One, also named Tammy, has come to see him. Season 4, with Ben's encouragement, Leslie decides to run for city council, and the end to their relationship. Leslie hires Andy as her assistant. Patricia Clarkson appears as Ron's first ex-wife, Tammy One, who uses her power as an IRS employee to trick Ron into thinking he's being audited and temporarily takes complete control over his life. Tom and John Ralphio's company, Entertainment 720, quickly blows through massive amounts of promotional funding while performing little actual work. The company goes out of business and Tom returns to his old job. After struggling to move on both personally and professionally, Ben and Leslie get back together, and Ben sacrifices his job to save Leslie from losing hers. The scandal leads her political advisors to abandon Leslie's campaign, and the Parks Department volunteers to become her new campaign staff. Ben agrees to be Leslie's campaign manager. Leslie's ex-boyfriend Avery appears and unsuccessfully attempts to win Leslie back. Leslie's campaign faces a myriad of setbacks against her main opponent, Bobby Newport, and his famous campaign manager Jennifer Berkeley. Anne and Tom begin an extremely rocky romantic relationship. April takes on more responsibility in the department, shouldering much of Leslie's usual work. In the season finale, Jennifer offers Ben a job in Washington, which he reluctantly accepts, and after the race is initially called for Newport, Leslie wins the position in a recount. Season 5, Ben flourishes in his new job on a congressional campaign in Washington, D.C., as does April, whom he brought along as an intern. Leslie and Andy visit Ben and April, and Leslie begins to feel self-conscious about her small-town job. Leslie begins working as a city councilor, but finds opposition in her fellow councilmen, particularly Councilman Jeremy Jam, an immature orthodontist who becomes her arch-enemy. Andy begins training to become a cop with help from Chris. Tom tries to find a new business idea. Ron meets Diane, a woman who needs help fixing a pothole, and begins dating her despite being intimidated by her two young daughters. Jennifer offers Ben a job on another campaign in Florida, much to Leslie's displeasure, but Ben turns it down and returns to Pawnee, surprising Leslie by proposing to her. She happily says yes. Ben's divorced parents come to their engagement party and argue the whole time. April proposes turning Lot 48 into a dog park, which bothers Leslie, but they compromise. Tom starts a business renting high-end clothing to teenagers. Ben wants to bring in an architect from neighboring Eagleton to help with the park, now called the Pawnee Commons, which is hard for Leslie to accept. Anne decides she's ready to be a single mom and begins searching for sperm donors. Leslie and Ben plan a fundraising event for the Pawnee Commons, and decide to have an impromptu wedding that night. When Jam ruins the ceremony, Ron knocks him out with a single punch, and the wedding recommences in City Hall. Andy finds out he failed the cop test. Anne, seeing Chris console Andy in a fatherly way, decides she would like to have her baby with him. Leslie continues pushing forward with much resistance from Jam. Ben gets a job with Sweetums, heading the charity foundation, and hires Andy as an assistant. Jerry retires from the parks department, but comes back to work a few hours per week. A mystery person rips off Tom's business idea and offers to buy his business off of him. Angry locals, led by Jam, call for Leslie to be recalled from office. Andy goes on a hunt to find out who is pregnant, and it is revealed to be Diane. Season 6 On May 9, 2013, NBC renewed Parks and Recreation for a sixth season. The season debuted on September 26, 2013 with an hour-long episode set in London. It was announced in July 2013 that Rob Lowe and Rashida Jones would leave the show during the fall broadcast program season. Diane announces she's pregnant as the season begins. Ron proposes to her, she accepts, and they get married. It is also revealed that Anne is pregnant with Chris, a child. Andy takes a temporary job in London. The town of Eagleton goes into bankruptcy and is absorbed by Pawnee, an effort spearheaded by Leslie after she sees no other way to save the town. As the governments merge, several Eagleton staffers briefly join the Pawnee Parks Department, with only Craig remaining long-term. Leslie loses the recall vote and returns to the Parks Department full-time, but remains devoted to assuring the merger is successful. Tom sells Rent-A Wagon a cash settlement. Ben is fired from Sweet UMs and comes back to work at the local accounting firm, but quits promptly after Chris tells him that he has been voted in as the next city manager. April buys Ron's cabin in the woods. It is later revealed that Chris and Anne are having a boy. Leslie starts breaking ground on Pawnee Commons. Anne and Chris leave town for Michigan. Beginning with anniversaries, Jim Ohai and Retta get a spot in the opening theme, replacing Rashida Jones and Rob Lowe. As a way to garner public support for the unpopular merger of Pawnee and Eagleton, the Parks Department begins work on the Pawnee-Eagleton Unity Concert. In The Wall, it is revealed that Ron and Diane have had their baby, John Swanson, without informing anyone in the office. Afterward, Ron single-handedly renovates the third floor of City Hall. In Galentine's Day, Anne and Chris have their baby, Oliver Perkins Traeger. In Flu Season 2, Leslie reveals that she is pregnant. Leslie and Ben also find out that they're having triplets. In the finale, Tom's Bistro opens to a terrible start with the investor pulling out, but becomes a hotspot when it plays host to the after-party for the highly successful Unity concert. Leslie takes the job as regional director for the National Park Service in Chicago, immediately submitting a proposal to bring the job to Pawnee. The finale ends 3 years in the future, where Leslie has had her triplets and is competently running the Midwest Regional Office of the National Park Service from the third floor of Pawnee City Hall. Season 7 NBC confirmed that the show was renewed for a 7th season on March 19, 2014. On May 11, 2014, NBC confirmed that Season 7 would be its last, consisting of 13 episodes. Although the program had always aired in NBC's Thursday night block, the final episodes were moved to Tuesdays, NBC's new comedy night, to compete with CBS's and ABC's dramas. The 7th season began airing on January 13, 2015 and concluded on February 24, 2015. Episodes